Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, just when you thought openSSL was safe, we've got a whole new round of security flaws. Then we'll go inside an online carding shop that's massive, and then it's a big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi, everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 165 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on June 5th, 2014. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, DigitalOcean, Ting, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Our live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. You got to go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hey, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Alan. How you doing?
Good.
Good, good. Well, so we had a really huge show last week. And I'm not going to say we don't have a big show this week, because we have a big show. But compared to last week, I think this is like right there in the middle. It's like kind of, you know, I'm a little worn out, I'm going to be honest, because last night was episode 100 of the Unfiltered show, and I was here at the studio till like almost midnight working on that. So then I got here for the morning show. So this is like my third show in like a really short time period, but I'm good. It's nice out. I'm enjoying the weather. So I'm ready to do a little TechSNAP. And we have some interesting, like another problem with GNU TLS, which is a bit unfortunate. And we got some interesting roundup links and some great feedback, including LAN net neutrality. What? So we'll talk about that in the feedback segment. So we're doing two news stories this week, Alan. So first I want to start and thank our first sponsor this week, and that's IX Systems. Go over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP to support the TechSNAP program and to thank IX Systems, and also to learn a little bit more about them. They've got a great guide to buying new servers for open source.
Yep.
And you can grab...
answers all the questions you might have about why you should use them over top of, you know, Dell or HP or whoever else you would normally buy a server from.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with IX Systems, IX Systems is really a great shop for building systems that are based around the Intel Xeon processors. They can build low-end systems to high-end systems. In fact, one of our great examples, of course, is I'm a FreeNAS Mini user. I am a bit of a FreeNAS. And then you can go all the way from something like that, which is, you know, within $1,000 price range, several $100.
Fits under your desk.
Yeah. And then all the way up to something, there's a great example of just like the super high-end, the IX Systems Megaport.
Yeah. It's a 2U machine that's actually 4 separate computers. They're each, it's little like, almost like it's a mini blade type thing. And each one has 6 10 gigabit NICs in it on top of 2 processors and 256 gigs of RAM each.
What would you do, Alan, if you had something like that?
That chassis has a terabyte of RAM and a total of 24 10 gigabit interfaces.
What would you do if you had a rig like that, Alan?
I would stream a lot of video.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Yeah.
The problem with having a rig like that is I don't have the internet for it.
Well, there's that. You know what's awesome about IX Systems, too, is they also participate in the community. They're from the community. Oh, yes. They're involved with a lot of the projects that they utilize to make awesome projects. They partner with their hardware, but they also go right out and reach out to all communities. In fact, if you're going to Texas Fest, Linux Texas Fest in Austin, Texas on June 13th through the 14th, keep an eye out for IX Systems, because guess what? They'll be there.
Yeah, so what Chris meant to say there was Texas Linux Fest.
What did I say?
I used Linux Texas Fest.
Oh, well, okay. All right.
But there's a fest. It's a Texas and it's about Linux. So
Texas Linux Fest 2014 in Austin, Texas, June 13th through the 14th. And you can find out why Sony, Disney, GM, NASA, Craigslist, Evernote, Box, Dr. Phil, the Mozilla Foundation, Scale Engine, and Jupiter Broadcasting all are IX Systems customers. It's a pretty look at this list they have on their website. So go over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP to get started, and a big thank you to IX Systems for sponsoring the TechSNAP program.
Also, check out next week's episode of BSD Now when we have somebody from IX Systems on to tell an awesome war story.
A ZFS war story, right?
ZFS war story, indeed.
Okay. So should we start with openSSL? We have a security advisory to cover, don't we?
Yes.
Jeez, I cannot talk today. I've been broadcasting for too long.
I combined the two together. So there's actually a series of 7 openSSL vulnerabilities plus a GNU TLS vulnerability of its own.
So we'll start at openSSL and then we'll go to GNU TLS?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
So, you know, after Heartbleed, there was a lot of worry about openSSL, and a lot of the research that's gone into it has resulted in fixing a whole slew of different flaws. However, the most important one is especially critical because it could allow a man-in-the-middle attack where someone who could, view your traffic, whether that be, if they were listening on the Wi-Fi that you're using at home or at a coffee shop or something, or spying on the server side or listening in the middle somewhere, or however they got in the middle, they could actually decrypt your traffic and possibly even modify it, which could be even more dangerous.
Sure.
So you should update to the latest version of openSSL. If you're on 0.9, the latest is 0.9.8ZA. So they put letters after the last number for patches, and they've now passed Z, so they had to start adding a second letter.
Ouch.
So they're now at ZA and
No shame.
ZB
No
and
shame.
ZC going forward.
Wow.
Or 1.0.0M or 1.0.1H. So the first vulnerability, CVE 2014-0224, an attacker using a carefully crafted handshake can force the use of weak key material in openSSL TLS clients and servers. This can be exploited by a man-in-the-middle attack where the attacker can decrypt and modify traffic from the attacked client and server. The attack can only be performed between a vulnerable client and server. Currently, all openSSL clients are vulnerable. However, servers are only vulnerable if they're running 101 or 102. So if you're using the older 098, which is the default in FreeBSD 9, then you're not vulnerable on the server side, but on the client side, all versions are vulnerable. So everybody should update. Users of openSSL servers earlier than 101 are advised to upgrade as a precaution as well. Then there's CVE 2014-0221. By sending an invalid DTLS handshake to an openSSL DTLS client, code can be made to recurse, eventually causing a denial of service attack. So you can basically cause an infinite loop by causing it to keep going into itself more and more until it uses up all the resources on the server. Only applications using the openSSL as a DTLS client are actually affected by that particular bug, though. CVE 2014-0195, a buffer overrun, which I think they mean overrun. Anyway, a buffer overrun attack can be triggered by sending an invalid DTLS fragment to an openSSL DTLS client or server. This is potentially exploitable to run arbitrary code on the vulnerable client or server. So that means that someone could trick either your server or your client into running an exploit, which would be really bad. You're using openSSL because you don't want the NSA to spy on you, and instead the NSA can install a virus because of a vulnerability in openSSL.
Right.
Again, this particular vulnerability only applies to openSSL as a DTLS client or server. CVE 2014-0198, a flaw in the do SSL3 write function can allow remote attackers to cause a denial of service via a null pointer dereference. This flaw only affects openSSL 100 and 101 when used with SSL mode release buffers, which is not the default and not a very common configuration.
Yeah.
But if it is in that configuration, then they can basically crash whatever program is using SSL. So if that's your web server, then your web server's down, and they've, by sending one packet, they could take out your whole web server. CVE 2010-5298. So this means this is a vulnerability that was actually found in 2010.
Yeah.
A race condition in the SSL3 read byte function can allow remote attackers to inject data across sessions or cause a denial of service. This flaw only affects multi-threaded applications using openSSL 100 or 101, where SSL mode release buffers is enabled, which is not the default and not common. I think this SSL mode release buffers is one of the things people have started enabling after Heartbleed. And looks like some of them that did are finding flaws in parts of openSSL that didn't really get tested a lot before Heartbleed.
Interesting.
CVE 2014-3470. OpenSSL TLS clients enabling anonymous elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman cipher suites are subject to a denial of service attack. Also, there's CVE 2014-0076. OpenSSL 100 and 098 now are patched to include a fix for this bug, which is a fix for the attack described in the paper Recovering OpenSSL Elliptic Curve DSA Nounces using the Flush plus Reload cache side channel attack. So basically, in a previous patch, in the 101G, the Heartbleed patch, they fixed a certain attack, but they only fixed it in the newest version, whereas in this release, they fix it in the 2 older versions as well. This is a side channel attack where someone that could read the cache, for example, if they were in another virtual machine on the same physical machine as your virtual machine, where they might be able to steal your keys, or in this case, your the random number you use that you're only ever supposed to use once. That's kind of part of the randomness. So anyway, whole slew of OpenSSL bugs, so you're going to want to make sure you update everything.
Just when you thought OpenSSL was safe, Alan, comes right back at us.
Yeah. Well, and more specifically, no one ever thought OpenSSL. Well,
yeah, I
up
know.
until Heartbleed, people might have been under the wrong impression
Right.
that OpenSSL was safe.
Or didn't think
Now-
to think of it.
Yeah, and now they know it's more people are, Heartbleed caused more eyeballs,
Yeah.
and more eyeballs means finding more bugs more quickly.
Right? It definitely seems to be the case.
So it'll be interesting to see now that the core initiative is going ahead, or the core infrastructure initiative,
Right.
where we might actually get audits of some of this code and actually push even
right.
more fixes.
Yeah.
So we can expect to see a whole slew more of these. The advantage this time is that it was coordinated. You saw patches
Yeah.
come out for, Debian, Ubuntu, Red Hat, FreeBSD, all of them all came out at the same time before the news stories.
Mm.
It was
That
all
is
timed
nice.
and coordinated the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
And how it probably would have been even for Heartbleed if it hadn't been for the fact that multiple people discovered it around the same time, and that set panic into motion.
Right, and maybe also it kind of reminded them of the things they needed to correct. So the next time something like this came around, they were much ready to work together. They're much more ready to work together and be organized because of the lessons learned on Heartbleed.
Well, no, it was basically the same organization. Just last time things kind of got out of hand.
That's
right?
what I mean. Like I think people learn. People like. Like when you go, oh man, we really botched that. We really got to make sure we tighten these communication windows up. And
Right,
things
but
like that.
it's like the communications were going fine. It's just happened that they had to jump the gun or that OpenSSL jumped the gun because a second report came in, and they're like, all right, if more than one person is finding this, they're probably finding it because it's being exploited against them, and we need to give up on the coordinated disclosure, and this is now an emergency. If you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. So it's not, but it's not just OpenSSL that has problems.
Right. So moving on, GNU TLS, which is the Free Software Foundation's alternative to OpenSSL, has released a set of fixes for their version because of a problem with the hello command, which is how you start up a session. So CVE 2014-3466. A flaw was found in the way GNU TLS parses session IDs from the server hello packets in the TLS/SSL handshake. A malicious server could use this flaw to send an excessively long session ID value and trigger a buffer overflow in the connecting SSL client, using GNU TLS, causing it to crash or possibly execute arbitrary code. So by you trying to go to a website that has SSL, that website could trick your client into running a virus. By basically embedding it in the hello message. The flaw is in the way the read server hello and GNU TLS read server hello message or functions, where the session ID length is checked to not exceed the incoming packet size, but not checked to ensure it doesn't exceed the maximum session ID length. So the standard specifies that the session ID will only be this long, and the code only checks that the message isn't longer than the packet, which wouldn't be valid. But they don't check that it's, so they have a buffer this big and they're reading something bigger into it, and then you overflow and stick all the rest of that data where it's not supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. That's it?
Yeah, if you so I just see somebody in the chat room says that they're still on OpenSSL 101G. That means they need to upgrade. You should be on 101H.
Oh, busted. Patch your S, chat room. Alan caught you. Man, what a bunch of jerks, right, Alan?
Yep.
Those guys. All right. Well, I'll take a second here and thank one of our sponsors this week. That's the great folks over at DigitalOcean. Go to DigitalOcean.com to get started. In fact, I'm logged into my DigitalOcean account right now. I thought we haven't done this for a while. I want to tell you a little bit about DigitalOcean, and then I'll show you their dashboard. So, DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. Users can get started in about 55 seconds or less in our user's case, and pricing plans start around $5 a month for 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, a blazing fast CPU, and 1 terabyte of transfer. DigitalOcean has data center locations in New York, San Francisco, and Amsterdam. Their interface is simple. Their control panel is intuitive, and power users can replicate that control panel on a larger scale with their straightforward API. What I like about it is the system is so straightforward to use. It saves me so much time. So let's just call this the USS TechSNAP. Have I used that one before, Alan? I don't think so. The USS TechSNAP, that'll be the name of my droplet. Now, the USS TechSNAP is going to be a big boat. So I'm going to go for one of the big boys. I'm going to go 2 gigs of RAM, 40 gigabyte SSD, and 3 terabytes of transfer, $20 a month, or about 3 cents hourly. And because Alan's on the East Coast, I can just select my region right here. And I'm going to say, let's go to New York. Well, New York number 2 is probably pretty close to Alan, so we'll go there. And now for the distribution. I think Alan's kind of a CentOS guy. So I'm going to say CentOS. Sure. What, Alan? What?
Since FreeBSD isn't an option, CentOS would be my next choice.
Oh, really? Over Ubuntu 14.04, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
By a lot.
All right. Would you like how about one of the later versions of CentOS? Would that be good? Let's go with the most recent.
5?
Yeah, let's go with that. And we'll say Alan's going to want backups and private networking. And there you go. You click Create. It will spin up a virtual machine. You'll give you root access, assign an IP. Then you can go take care of DNS management, image backups, and all those kinds of things. And because of those SSD speeds, man, you can get so much density on one of these DigitalOcean droplets. I tell you what, that's one of the things that really stands out. Plus, I have to say, I'm not sure my droplet's gone down once. And, of course, DigitalOcean guarantees 99.99% uptime. They have an SLA, and they have great support, too. DigitalOcean.com, but here's the best part. Use our promo code SNAPJUNE when you check out. Yeah, SNAPJUNE. You get a $10 credit. You can try out the $5 rig for 2 months, totally free. Gives you plenty of time to try out the one-click installation of applications like WordPress, Ruby on Rails, Docker, Ghost, Doku, Redmine, Mean, GitLab, Django. What's LAMP? Sign up for this lightweight web stack on a fresh droplet, and you'll be ready to go with Nginx, MySQL, and PHP. Oh, LAMP for Nginx instead of Apache and MySQL.
FNIMP.
LINIMP. And so they have LIMP. They have a one-click deployment right there, and they also have super easy snapshot management, droplet backups, and SSH key management, all of that stuff. DigitalOcean.com. Use the promo code SNAPJUNE when you check out. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. It's a great service. So our next article is a little digging that Krebs did, right?
Yep.
All right, Alan, where do we start?
So this is inside a carding shop. So a carding shop is a place that basically sells stolen credit cards. So he's basically doing an expose inside of this one called McDumples.
Okay.
And they're kind of trying to, make fun of McDonald's inside of it. But so he kind of looks inside this carding shop and shows how it works. If you look near the bottom, Chris, there's a slideshow. It's kind of embedded. I didn't realize it was a slideshow at first. I was like, "Where's the slideshow?"
Okay, I'll go look.
I was expecting a PDF file, but near the bottom there's a slideshow, and when you hover over it, you can flip through the slides.
Okay. Oh yeah, I see.
This particular shop focuses on what are called dumps, which is the full track data stolen off the magnetic strip on the card. So that means that you can write that to a blank card or a stolen or a gift card or whatever you want, and it allows you to the fraudsters who buy these stolen cards to actually go to like a big box store and buy big ticket items that are easy to sell for cash, right? So rather than your typical online stolen credit card is here's a bunch of credit card numbers and you can try to buy stuff with them or whatever. The problem with that is if you're shipping it, there's obvious paper trail of where you're shipping it to and stuff, right? And depending on what it is, it's not always easy to make money that way. But with these ones, they take these stolen credit cards and then go down to Best Buy or Walmart or whatever and buy like giant TVs and stereos or whatever other stuff they want, and then just sell those on the street for a fraction of the value. But it doesn't matter because they got it for free, right? They're using the stolen credit card, and it's a lot harder to track that. So apparently, this particular McDumple's store
Mhm.
went online in late April of 2013. Like many other dump shops, McDumple's actually requires potential new customers to pay a $100 deposit via Bitcoin before they're even allowed into the site to see what's for sale.
Nice.
So this helps keep law enforcement and so on out.
Right.
Also, typically, a typical of most card shops, the homepage once you log in features the latest news about new batches of stolen cards that have been added. So we just got another batch of those cards from Target or whatever.
Good
right?
news, everybody.
And then they also have the price reductions. When cards have been up for sale for a while, after they started being used for fraud and so on, people will cancel the cards, or cards just expire or whatever. And because of that, they drop the prices on the cards as they get older.
Sale
and more
time.
used up. Yeah. And so they'll post the news for that as well. So if you look through the slideshow, you can see a bunch of the different sets.
Mhm.
But Brian also has a great little, what did he call it again? The glossary, where he's talking about the different terms that are used on these sites and understanding, kind of the lingo or whatever. So there's a base, which is actually the arbitrary name given to a particular dump of cards, and they're typically based on where the cards were stolen from. So, like if you're flipping through there, you'll see there's ones like, Midwest 1 or Southeast 1 or UK 1, Midwest 3, Canada 1, US Prime 1.
Yeah.
West Coast 2, West Coast 3, Central Plains, etc. Mobile use equals bad idea. That's a great dump name. Then they have the bins, the bank identification number. That's the first 6 digits of the card number. And that tells you which bank the cards are from. So you can, target specific banks or specifically, purposely avoid certain banks. Like I happen to know that Bank of America shut down all these stolen cards, so I'm not going to try the Bank of America ones. I'm going to focus on the other banks. There's a checker. So these are basically some site that they can use to make sure the cards are still going to work.
Oh.
And oftentimes, like if you look at some of these sets when they're for sale, they mention an automatic refund policy.
30-hour refund policy, yeah.
Yeah, so that means that if you try the card and it doesn't work within the first 30 hours, then you can get your money back for that card. And so they'll have checkers where you can check those really quickly before you actually go about trying to use them.
Wow. What nice service they offer.
Yeah. I wonder how some of those work, because it seems like, if you identify that something is a checker, then you would just shut down every card that ever tries to use that checker.
Yeah.
Interestingly, if you go back a couple of months when we talked about Netflix's gift card store being shut down temporarily, it actually turned out because some Brazilian hackers were using it as a checker for stolen credit cards.
That's what I was just going to suggest, is they must have to use some sort of high volume service where they can kind of bury what their activity in the volume, and shutting them down would be, would have a big of a negative impact on somebody or some commercial entity. Huh.
And sometimes the card shop, the place that's selling the stolen cards, will actually provide their own checker for a fee of like 20 cents per card to check.
That's a nice high rate shop there. I like that.
Yep.
They got the full
there's
service.
Some great screenshots in here. You can see they have different sets of cards, and you can see that how old the set of cards is. Like this set of cards was stolen 1 month and 10 days ago, and you can get 1,254 stolen credit cards for $10,000.
Welcome to the new reseller. This is a brand new introductory price. Refund for 12 hours, 25 credits, or 300 for 50 classic, or 375 for 50 random for $450. Wow.
There are also packs, which are large bundles of dump, often from a variety of different hacked merchants in a particular region, sold at a wholesale price. So with a pack, the idea isn't that you're going to buy these cards and go and exploit them yourselves. The idea is that you're a smaller dump store, and you're going to buy a bunch of cards to then now sell on your site.
I don't know, Alan. It seems like this is an industry that is just...
Yep.
I mean, this is pretty mature.
There's also a first-hand base, And that's when the store that's selling the stolen credit cards was directly involved in stealing the cards. And so they know, that less people have ever seen these cards, and so they're worth more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Holiday shopping, the long-awaited first-hand update is here. The wait is over and it was worth it. Base holiday shopping has arrived. 30-hour refund policy.
Multiple bases of some 40 million cards were stolen in a Target breach and resold via a different carding website. And it's probably the biggest example he's ever seen of a first-hand base. There's also resellers. Some dump shops rely on multiple suppliers for stolen cards. Contrary to the conventional meaning of the word, these thieves are supplying cards that were not sold anywhere else. Once a card is sold, it's removed from the marketplace, and any suppliers found to be double dipping are quickly banned from the dump community.
Mm-hmm. I bet.
And there's also some of the sets that are for sale will include a valid rate. But basically, their guess at how many of the cards are still valid, especially as the sets get older and have been used up. How many of the cards have been canceled by the bank already? If a base is advertised as a 70% valid rate, customers can expect an average of 3 out of every 10 cards they buy to not work, to be worthless, and actually possibly, if they're trying to use them, it's going to set off alarms. Cards advertised as valid rates in excess of 90% typically demand the highest price and are are a strong indicator of a breach that has only been discovered by the breach merchant or some large financial institutions.
Yeah.
As the banks catch on, they'll start canceling the cards.
For
and
sure.
That success rate will keep going down.
I like that when people would log in, they would have here's what's new. Our next big update comes with some perks, namely track 1, state and zip info. We have updated our site to accommodate this. We've also updated the bins database we've been using. Feel free to try out the new search options for state and zip.
Yeah. Well, because some places that take credit cards online or whatever will want to know your zip code.
Yeah, you got to have it in there to bill it.
The address verification.
Yeah.
AVS, they call it, where they, check that the address somebody put in is the one that's on your credit card. And, this way, if you can manage to steal that data with the credit cards, it makes those stolen credit cards worth, $20 each instead of $5 each.
They also show how they would capitalize on current events, like large sporting events and stuff like that. Here's a slide, South Africa during looks like a soccer event.
Oh, right, the World Cup the other year. It was a big thing.
Yeah.
This stuff goes back to 2013. So.
Yeah. Wow. This is amazing, to go through this and just see how sophisticated this is.
Yep. It's crazy how much is actually going on here. And it was great that Brian was able to get in there and...
Yeah, this is what he's the best at, isn't it?
Yes.
This is his bag, where he gets in there and understands
but also, if you look just below the slides, there's a great timeline where you can actually see the order of this stuff actually happening.
Yeah, I was going through that a little bit, yeah. Yeah, that's really nice.
Putting people out of business sale.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys got to check the show notes if you're listening to the audio version, because that timeline and slideshow is really good.
Yep.
That's all really good. Brian Krebs, man, just knocking it out of the park again when he gets in these groups and just figures out how they work and really just seems to get, the government must be talking to him. They must be being so, Brian, tell me, what do you know?
Well, we've known for a while that Brian has contacts within the banking community and the security community, and, that's how he finds out about most of this stuff. Is a lot of it is his own research, though, and he does a really good job.
Yeah.
So, while seeing the movie about him will probably be interesting, I'd rather hear more about, the more technical stuff. He'd have to write his own stuff or something.
That would be great. Maybe he will one day.
Yep.
Him and Bruce should get together. It'd be like an Arnold and Bruce Willis action movie, only for nerds.
Well, it's funny because I had a link to Bruce's blog in my for the show notes, and then when I actually read it, it's just him directing you to go to read Brian Krebs stuff.
There you go. All right, Alan, well, if you allow me to take a minute here and thank Ting.com, I'd appreciate it. TechSNAP.Ting.com to get started. TechSNAP.Ting.com will take $25 off your first device. If you've got a Ting-compatible device and they got a BYOD page where you can check that, they'll give you a $25 credit. So, why Ting? Ladies and gentlemen, it's as simple as this. Ting is finally mobile that makes sense. They take your minutes, your messages, your megabytes, they add them up at the end of the month. Whatever you fall into, whatever bucket that is, that's just what you pay. You don't pay $100 contract or an $80 contract, so that way you can have 600 minutes, but maybe you use 300 minutes or 400 minutes, but you need those extra minutes just in case you have a busy month, and you pay into that and pay into that all the time. What a waste. How much data did you use? Does it vary like mine does? That's why it makes sense to pay based on usage. But the other great thing about Ting, no contracts, which means no early termination fees. And when you buy your device, you own it outright. So go to techsnap.ting.com to get started. Check them out. Now, if you've been a Ting customer for a while, you'll also appreciate them for their dashboard and their very transparent approach. In fact, the Ting blog, I visit it quite frequently, like today. There was an announcement that Sprint and T-Mobile might be merging. And my first thought was, well, how's that affect Ting, right? Well, here you go, right here on the Ting blog. They talk about it, and it actually looks like it could be a pretty positive thing potentially. So if you've been curious about that, go to ting.com/blog, but get started by going to techsnap.ting.com. And while you're over there, go take a look at some of their devices. They're adding new devices all the time. Look at the price for the Samsung Galaxy S4. When you go to techsnap.ting.com, they'll apply the discount. Ting's partnered up with their buddies at Glide. S4, $285. You own that mother outright. No contract, no early termination fee. You're not subsidizing. That's the whole cost. And then it's only $6 a month after that for a Galaxy S4, $285. And maybe if you're the fruit persuasion, you can get an iPhone 5, $260. Man, I might almost pick that up just to try it out on the Ting network. $260 for an iPhone 5? What is up? So go over to techsnap.ting.com to get started, see what they got. They got lots of great, including some really good rates on the HTC One M7. They've also got a great price on the Nexus 5, and they just added the Galaxy S5 if you want that too, the latest and greatest Galaxy. And they also have the Ting personal shopper who'll go out and find a previously loved phone for you. TechSnap.ting.com. And a really big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. It's a great service. I got my Nexus 5 on it right here. Loves it. Yep. Loves it. And I just got an email telling me my version of Metasploit is vulnerable to the openSSL bugs. Oh, well, there you go. They're on top of it. So thanks, Ting. All right, Alan, I also wanted to give a little mention, if I could indulge myself for a second. Mm-hmm. The new show launched this week, Tech Talk Today. 4 episodes are in the can. Monday through Thursday, it's a daily show on the Jupiter Broadcasting Network, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, and then out for download a little bit after that. And I think the first week went pretty good. So if you'd like to check it out, I'm going to try to make them between 15 and 30 minutes. So I'm still working on that. It's a big experiment. A daily show is a crazy thing. We'll see how I'm doing next week this time. I might be like a shadow of myself. Like, oh, hi, Alan. Welcome to TechSNAP. Oh, we'll see. All right, is there anything else we want to cover in the news segment?
No, I think that's about it.
All right, then you know what that means. It's time for the TechSNAP feedback. For sending your emails to techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website, or even better, starting a thread in our brand new, just launched it today, subreddit, links.techsnap.tv. And nope, that's not true. 2 of our submissions came from our subreddit this week. And Alan, our first email comes from Hacker O White. Dear Chris and Alan, I'm a long-time listener of TechSNAP and less, and occasionally I catch BSD Now and Unfilter. Every time I visit the website and ask for my public IP, anytime I visit a website and ask for my public IP, they give me a different answer every time. My question is this normal? I assume no, because some applications that require my public IP to work properly do not function as intended if your IP is changing. Is there a way to allocate a longer-lasting external IP to my machine without buying a static IP or VPN? Do I have something on my router doing this? I love it for normal browsing because websites have a hard time tracking me, but it's just not working out. Thanks in advance. Keep up the great work. P.S. I look forward to watching the first episode of your new show, Chris. And he says, thanks for the DNS crypt tutorial, Alan.
It really depends. You didn't quite give us enough information. A, what is your ISP? B, how different are the numbers? What do they look like? And what random websites are you going to find out what your IP address is?
Don't you think this almost sounds like he's behind
it could be carrier grade NAT.
That's what I was thinking.
Or even he didn't say where he was even. I'm assuming he meant at home. But if you're at an office, oftentimes they'll have a setup where they have 8 public IPs that would all be sequential. Like they would all be right beside each other. It would just be a range of public IPs.
That's what I was thinking.
And that's because there's only so many ports on each IP address, and so they spread it out because they have so many connections going on. And usually, though, they'll have some kind of hashing or something. So if you're connecting to the same website, that website always gets the same IP, so that works as intended. But it really depends on
their
a lot
gear,
of things.
on the ISP's gear and setup.
Yeah, but if he could give us more information, we might be able to tell him. The other thing he mentioned about websites not being able to track them is easy. It depends what you're doing. If it's just a typical browser, your cookies exist no matter when your IP
has the same
changes.
ID in the cookie file.
Now, if you're visiting a website in private browsing mode and then closing private browsing mode and opening it up again and going to the website and you have a different IP, then yes, it's harder for them to track.
And you could verify that if you use Firefox, install the Light Beam extension. Man, it is illuminating. Not to be too punny there, but it is really illuminating. And, to solve the problem, I know he kind of expressed that he wasn't very interested in it, but don't you think a VPN would, if he was browsing from that VPN's endpoint all the time, he would at least have that VPN endpoint IP?
Yeah, and now it depends what he's doing. Some systems where, for example, like pay-per-view video sites or something, where they restrict it so you can only so only the IP that paid can watch the video.
Right.
Having your IP change can be a problem.
Yeah.
But so we'd like to hear more about what his ISP is and what some of the IP addresses that it spits out are.
And I almost wonder if he's even in the U.S. or if he's outside the U.S. I would suspect.
Yeah, because I know especially a couple places in Europe are going into the carrier grade NAT pretty heavy because of the exhaustion of IPv4 addresses.
All right, Marco writes in with a question about LAN neutrality. Get ready for this one, Alan. He says, with so much talk about net neutrality, I started to think about LAN neutrality. How does it work in theory? If no special setup is made to the LAN, does any traffic have any priority over the other? For instance, let's assume that I have a 1 megabit internet connection, two identical computers which are accessing the internet at the same time simultaneously. If they are each trying to stream the same 1 megabit of bitrate video, which computer would finish the movie sooner? Is there any difference in traffic priority if the computer streams a movie from YouTube or streams a song? Which traffic has priority? Or perhaps streaming songs versus downloading an image or file from the web? Or does HTTP traffic have priority over FTP or PDP or VoIP, etc.? And in contrast, what is the traffic priority on the internet? Thanks for the clarification. Keep on with the big show. Best regards, Marco.
Yeah, so by default on a LAN, there's no the switch that's actually has the physical limit of the speed has no idea what's going on inside the packets, right? So when you're at layer 2 at Ethernet, you don't know what's at layer 3 to know the IP addresses, or layer 7 to know what the application is, whether it's HTTP or FTP. So it doesn't care. Everything is weighted equally. And so, if you have two machines trying to pull down 1 megabit streams at a time and your internet can only do 1 megabit, they'll each get half a megabit or something to that effect. Now, there are other factors. If one of the websites is further away, it'll take longer to answer, and so it'll get proportionally less of the bandwidth.
Or potentially like downloading a file from one site over HTTP versus downloading another file over FTP, all things being equal. Do you think perhaps maybe FTP, if it's slightly...
Nope, they're both the same.
Just same? Okay. There you go. So it all depends on the end connection. It all depends on the end connection and where they're pulling it from.
Basically, when you're pushing stuff over a LAN, it's all equally weighted unless you set up priorities on a switch or on a router or something using QoS or something to that effect. And that is the idea for the internet, is that your ISP's job is to move the packets from here to there and not look inside them and not decide which one should have more priority.
Preach it, Alan.
Everybody's packet should be treated the same. Just like, water from the water main, right? I get the same access to the water that everybody else does. I shouldn't, just because my neighbor has more money than me doesn't mean he should get more water than I do.
Right. And also, you will find that a lot of the TechSNAP audience deploys systems like pfSense, and they'll do QoS. So they'll say, make sure Skype always has high priority, right? So that way you always know your Skype call is good, even if you've got a download going or something.
If you're interested, if you read the May-June edition of the FreeBSD Journal, I wrote a whole article on using IPFW's system called DummyNet, where you can impose traffic speed limit, do shaping and also queuing and set priorities and stuff. So you can do things like say, these applications have a combined 20 megabit limit on bandwidth, and this type of traffic should be weighted heavier than this type and have higher priority. and stuff, and it explains how to do all that. It's a great article in the FreeBSD Journal, the electronic magazine you can get.
Very good. Next email comes in from Julian. He says he's got a question regarding ZFS or ZFS on his NAS. He says, I'm very deep in the Linux world. I've been using it as my favorite OS for more than 10 years. I've even worked as a sysadmin with Linux and my network focus at a hosting company. He says, now everybody's talking about ZFS, so I thought it was time to try it out, but to be honest, I have no experience with FreeBSD or other Unix systems at all. Therefore, I'm considering to start FreeNAS as the OS for my NAS. There is a special requirement for this box. It's not just storing some multimedia files, photos, etc. It's also the backend for my /home directory, 3 workstations via NFS. Those are Arch Linux workstations. Currently, my NAS is running a minimal Debian extended 4 on top of LVM, on top of MD RAID, which is a RAID 5. My idea is to switch to FreeNAS using ZRAID 1. I have concerns regarding NFS performance as I found some complaints on the web regarding FreeNAS and NFS performance. It's a custom-made system based on the Supermicro Mini ITX server board, an Intel Atom D525 CPU, 4 gigs of RAM, and 4 2-terabyte Western Digital Reds. What do you guys think about this idea to switch over to FreeNAS? Will it be a performance disaster or a performance boost? Thanks, Julian.
I'm sure. Did he say how much RAM was in the system?
4 gigs.
It should be fine. The NFS performance on FreeBSD is very good. There are certain specific workloads having to do with stuff in virtual machines where they will request the sync flag saying that, don't return from this write until the data is all the way on the disk. And because you're going over the network and then you have ZFS, that can hurt performance a bit. But even VMware has a setting in their ESX stuff now to actually solve that problem. So that was more actually a problem with the NFS client that people were using to access the FreeNAS rather than a problem with the NFS implementation in the FreeNAS.
Yeah, I was going to say I've had a FreeNAS NFS box now for 2 years?
Yeah.
I have no performance complaints.
I max out the gigabit over NFS with my FreeBSD boxes. So.
What about an Intel Atom D525 CPU? You think an Atom might be the weak point there? Maybe if he's doing compression.
Depends what he's doing. Yeah, with compression maybe a little bit, but that shouldn't be that much. And, if you're not doing encryption, that won't really affect it either.
Okay.
So the CPU usage shouldn't be that big of a deal, except for maybe being able to drive the network card.
We had a little Sky pickup there, Alan, but I wanted to pick back up and ask you one last follow-up question. Any comments? Is ZRAID 1 an equivalent replacement for RAID 5? Better replacement? Same?
RAID Z1 would be the same as RAID 5. Although generally, if you only have 4 hard drives, it's kind of one of your only options. The only other option is a pair of RAIDs to give you a RAID 10, or a pair of mirrors to give you a RAID 10. Yeah. But then you'd only get 2 of the drives instead of 3 of the drives of capacity.
But he's worried about performance.
Right. Well, if you're really worried about performance, mirrors are the best. But if what did he say? He had 4 2-terabyte drives.
Yeah.
That would cut his array from 6 terabytes to 4.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be faster, but that's probably not worth it. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
You'll be fine with the RAID Z1. All right, Alan. I just I wanted to point out something that SMB and FLA dropped in the subreddit. I don't know if you've seen this, but Google's been sort of name and shaming ISPs, and so he was watching this week's recent Linux Action Show, and while he was watching, I'm showing screenshots of it here in the video. He was noticing he couldn't get HD playback to work, and a little blue box popped up underneath the YouTube video that says, "Are you experiencing service interruptions?" And then what it does is it gives him stats on how his ISP is doing relative to other HD videos on YouTube, and kind of shaming the ISP here, showing, look, when it's about 6 p.m., your ISP starts to suck bad. It's not YouTube, it's your ISP.
Yeah, they're overselling their network.
Yeah, and so Google's put up a whole experience. You can test your own experience. So SMB and FLA put a link in his poster. You can click that, and here you can see, here's my Xfinity Comcast rating. Looks like it starts to really suck around, looks like about 3 to 4 p.m., and then it gets pretty bad about 9 p.m. 92% of HD streams happen around then, and then it drops down. So it's interesting.
All right, that's interesting, because with my ISP, it's dark blue the whole way. Kind of between like 7 and 11, there's like a tiny fringe of the lighter blue, but there's never any low definition.
Really?
Yeah, basically the whole time is all solid high def.
Well, fancy. And then I wanted to give a shout out to Fondue Boy. He's looking for Swedish TechSNAP fans. He wants to do a meetup in Stockholm, and he's looking for LAS and TechSNAP fans. And he's got a few bites, so if you're in the area and would love to do a meetup, I think that'd be cool. I'd love to know how this goes, because I always fantasize about traveling around and doing meetups, so I'm always curious. I'll live vicariously through you guys' meetup, so tell me how it goes. So if you're if you're in Sweden or going to be in Stockholm and would like to do a meetup with Fondue Boy and other TechSNAP fans, link in the TechSNAP subreddit. Just go over to links.techsnap.tv. If you'd like to send us an email, you can do that too. Just go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com and click the contact link and then choose TechSNAP from the drop-down or email us directly. TechSNAP@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or even better, start a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And Alan, with the emails all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup of stories, it just didn't fit at the top of the show. But we still want to go over them and give you some links to follow up on your own. And a lot of these links came from our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Our first story from the Roundup this week has been making headlines every single day since Sunday. John Oliver's last week or whatever that new show is that he has. I haven't watched it yet. I'm planning to watch it tonight. Had a great bit on net neutrality, and so much so that it's swamped the FCC.
Yep.
And we can't play it here because it's like 13 minutes long, and HBO will take our show down if we play it.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was a really good piece. People really loved it, and I will have a link to the video in the Roundup if you guys want to go watch that. We want to give a special mention. Did you want to call anything else out about it?
Mostly just that, it really brings home the point that a lot of the argument going on now is not about net neutrality or not. It's about being able to stop the cable companies from doing the regular evil things that they do.
A new Heartbleed attack hits Android devices using Wi-Fi connections. Go figure. Now, this is, I believe, limited to Android 4.1.1.
Which is what I have. Yay.
Oh, really? Yeah, so it's dubbed Cupid. The new line of attack would perform the same Heartbleed procedure over Wi-Fi instead of the open web, either pulling data from the enterprise router or using a malicious router to pull data from an Android device, this is according to The Verge. In each case, the attacker would be able to view snippets of the working memory from the targeted device.
Yes, because with the way Heartbleed works, you could just keep pounding on it and get random chunks of memory from the machine over and over again.
Patch your S, Google. Patch your S. Malware creation breaks all records, 160,000 new samples every single day. What? 71% of which are Trojans, too.
Yeah. Net-security.org has this piece with some nice graphics. In particular, it kind of makes sense. Most of the malware that comes out now is about taking over your machine so they can use it to do whatever they want. Versus, worms, which are just about spreading, or viruses, which are usually just about...
Yeah, people want to make money.
Yeah, most often it's a Trojan so they can remote control your computer and make it do things like click on ads or, use it to do whatever they want. Whereas, just regular spyware where they're just, being annoying is down to like 5%. Which is interesting because for a while there, a couple of years ago, spyware was bigger than viruses.
Yeah.
And now it's settled back down the other way where, they found that, well, Trojan's better than spyware because it can do both.
Right. That's for sure. Makes way more money.
It's also interesting to look at, in this particular set of samples, they find that the infection rate was pretty high. China was the country with the most infections, with a rate of 52% of machines being infected.
Oh.
Followed by Turkey with 44% and Peru with 42%. Some of the least infected countries were Sweden, 21%, Norway, 21%, Germany, 24%, and Japan with 24%. And so Japan was the only non-European country that was on the list of the least infected countries.
That's the list I'd want to be on, not the other list.
Yeah, well, it goes to show, whether, especially some of the stats, from like Turkey and Peru, you just kind of assume if they're using pirated copies of Windows XP, then they're going to have more viruses than people that are not.
Yes. There you go. Trojan's back, baby. Trojan's back. Yep. All right. Well, this is kind of an interesting story that I've been following all week. Google is set to release an end-to-end encryption extension that's going to be used to work in Chrome and integrate with Gmail, supposedly. It's not available right now. They're having the community look at it and kind of vet it. And
Yeah, it's got some interesting aspects and some aspects I'm a little worried about.
yeah,
So basically what it does is it provides OpenPGP compatible email encryption, which is good, in a browser extension, and it's written in JavaScript, right? So that all, unlike other extensions like FireGPG or something, it doesn't require you to actually have an application running on your computer that the browser interfaces with.
Right.
It all happens in the browser, kind of like Keybase or whatever. Now, to deal with that, they've done a couple of things. It only does elliptic curve type encryptions, which require a lot less work. So it's faster. But the problem with that would be that would seem to suggest that you wouldn't be able to decrypt an email if the person who sent it to you didn't encrypt it with the elliptic curve. Although I guess if your key is, it might be okay. Specifically, for compatibility with GPG, you have to have GPT 2.1 to be able to do the elliptic curve stuff. So it means other people that are already encrypting their email and are using, like a desktop client, like I use Enigmail in Thunderbird, might not be able to read your encrypted messages currently. Although, we can push to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that they have the one key chain and they don't seem to have anything for getting other people's keys, public keys. They kind of talk a little bit about it in the FAQ, but they're like, yeah, you have to have the person's key in order to encrypt a message to them. And they don't seem to really talk about, using key servers or something to be able to find people's key by looking up their email address. And it seems like, well, how's this going to be very useful then?
The other thing that is not a big deal, but it's something just to note on a setup like this, is these extensions are auto-updated in the background without any user interaction. So features can be added and removed, and that gives me some concern when it's something I'm using for my encryption.
Yeah,
I would like to control the updates.
It's a little better when it's, not just from some random person, but still, that does concern me as well. I've been using it in my regular desktop client. Now, this kind of concept isn't really new. Like, FireGPG was around for almost 8 years now, I think. Although it's been discontinued mostly because when they were making it work with Gmail, the Gmail interface kept changing and it kept breaking the plugin.
Yeah, I remember that.
And there were a couple other issues where, malicious JavaScript on the page might have been able to capture the message out of the text box before you encrypted it.
Well, one thing that strikes me is it's going to make Google's targeted advertising a little less targeted.
Well, not necessarily, because if you're using the Google Chrome plugin, then it's going to decrypt it in your browser, and so Google would still be able to see it, possibly, if they wanted to. But it's their extension, right?
Yeah. Yeah, good point.
And I don't know that Google's been... Well, all your email won't be able to be encrypted because the person on the other end has to specifically support the encryption for it to work.
Right.
So it doesn't really solve that problem, although getting more people to use this stuff is good.
Making it easier is good,
Yeah, but if they don't sort out the problem of the public keys and having people be able to have your keys so that they can send you encrypted email, it's not going to help much.
There's also a little Easter egg treat for the NSA, a little screw you NSA message from Google in the extension source code. I talked about it on today's episode of Tech Talk Today. The other thing that jumps out at me about this is, if nothing else, this seems to be a practical example of Google responding to some of the privacy concerns people have. I like this. I think this is a great move from Google.
Yes.
Curious about the execution.
And also, can I have this in Firefox? Is that not going to switch to Chrome?
That would be really interesting to see if they do that, if they release it. I bet you it's written specifically for Chrome.
Right. And it might rely on, Chrome to interface with certain things.
Related to this is Google is now also listing the service providers who support TLS, and then you can filter based on the ones who do or don't support TLS when sending and receiving to and from Gmail, which is great to know.
Almost every modern mail server does, but a lot of the, like if you're using an open source mail server like Exim or Postfix or whatever,
or Comcast,
then you're already using probably already support TLS.
Comcast, it'll be working over the next few weeks.
A lot of places don't have proper certificates, but Google will encrypt it anyway.
It's funny. Comcast supports it, but for some reason doesn't use it when emailing Gmail. So Comcast said they'll be turning it on for Gmail.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Because usually you just connect and you'll be like, "Hey, other guy,
Yeah.
do you support encryption?" And he's like, "Yeah." Okay.
And they just do
And
it.
you start,
They have it turned off specifically for Gmail. I don't know why.
Could have been performance, the amount of email they exchanged with Gmail.
Yeah,
could have
maybe.
just actually got to the point where they're like, "Let's save the CPU cycles."
Maybe. Well, Alan, this next roundup talks about something that's been on our mind for a long time. This trust by default that's it's almost like built into embedded systems. This article says, "Beware of the next circle of hell: unpatched systems." Sounds
Unpatchable systems.
Unpatchable. Yeah, this sounds about like what we've been talking
worse.
about.
There's systems that haven't been patched yet, and that's bad. But systems that can't be patched,
right?
That's worse.
Right.
On top of Windows or Microsoft ending support for Windows XP, we've seen a lot of this with the embedded devices, and there's just nothing that's going to be done for them. Like, yeah, we made a new version of the device now, or we've gone out of business. There's a critical security flaw in Internet Explorer 8 that was discovered by HP, and it's probably not going to get fixed in XP.
No. Well, speaking of no surprises at all, guess what? Vulnerability in Linksys E4200 routers allows an authentication bypass. Surprise, surprise.
So normally you have to log into the admin interface to be able to change settings on this router. Well, with this vulnerability, you just get in without having to log in, and you can just start changing things willy-nilly. Like changing the DNS servers used by the router to be able to do a man-in-the-middle attack.
Yep.
Basically, when the user tries to go to their bank or Netflix or whatever they're trying to go to, you return a different IP address and intercept the connection.
Becoming more and more popular because of all the mobile devices on the Wi-Fi networks.
Especially with the bug in some of the mobile devices for a while there where they weren't actually checking the validity of the SSL certificate. So one of the things that SSL is supposed to do is prove to you that, hey, you're actually connecting to the real PayPal, not a fake one, or the real bank, not a fake one.
Yeah.
But sometimes there was bugs in the SSL implementation on some of these phones, especially there was a couple in GNU TLS, but also there was one in the Apple implementation that meant that it was like, oh, that's a SSL certificate. I'll just accept it, regardless of the fact that it's actually not the right one for my bank.
Jeez. Yep. I remember.
It's like, as long as it's encrypted, it doesn't matter who it's encrypted to.
Right. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Hey, our next story, is this about some fancy malware? What do we got here?
This is
the Soroya?
The new Soroya malware includes a form grabber. So basically, when it's running on your system, it can watch you filling out forms with, like your credit card number to buy something on Amazon or whatever, and steal that off your computer. And also memory scraping functionality, so it can get things like keys and other stuff.
Just sit back and watch and wait for you to buy something. I could see that. You know what's going to get me is I'm going to be ordering a sandwich on jimmyjohns.com like I was today. I'll be plugging in my credit card info, and I'll have some sort of scraper. And all I wanted was to buy a sandwich. And then boom.
Yep.
All my stuff got stolen. Well, guess what, Alan? Get your credit card ready because it's time to buy some SSDs, some crucial SSDs, the MX100s.
You skipped a story.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So there's a story here where you can use the Heartbleed vulnerability to exploit enterprise wireless networks and actually be able to steal people's data off an enterprise wireless network. Because, again, these are embedded devices that aren't getting updated.
Right. Backdoor and call monitoring surveillance gear?
Yes. That's the next story. So Krebs has this story. This is the one that I was actually reading Bruce Schneier's blog, and he pointed this one out. But it turns out there's a back door in the eavesdropping software that the police departments have been using. So it's a surveillance software from a company called Nice Technology or Nice Systems in Israel, and it turns out there's security vulnerabilities in it, and so that not just the police could be using it to listen in on phone calls. It's common or unfortunate that companies working on, especially even in sensitive spaces like surveillance, falling victim to the classic blunder of trying to bolt security onto the application after they build it instead of designing it with encryption or with security in mind when they build it.
Right. Jeez.
So the software is called Recording Express. And it contains an undocumented backdoor account that provides administrator-level access to the product. So it's not just a goof they made, that literally they designed a backdoor into it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then guess what? You make something for the if you make something for the good guys, the bad guys can use it too.
Attackers are able to completely compromise the voice recording and surveillance solution as they gain access to the system and database level and listen to recorded calls without prior authentication.
Jeez.
So they're building this for police departments to spy on you, and they built a backdoor into it so they could spy on the police. And now bad guys have found out about that backdoor. And that allows them to go in there and even listen to the recorded calls and record new calls and everything. Attackers would be able to use the voice recording server as a jump host or an island hopping thing to further attack the internal voice VLAN and break out into the rest of the network as well. According to the security firm's advisory, there are a slew of other security holes likely to exist in this product and their older products because they're aimed at corporations seeking call recording software for customer service, training, and verification. Right. So this software was originally built for like, when you call up some place's 800 number and they're like, your call may be recorded for training and quality purposes.
Right.
They built the software for that, and then they just slapped a bunch of stickers on it and sold it to the police, and it turns out it's full of holes.
Huh. And I'm sure they paid a real fair price for it too. Yeah. Real fair.
Apparently, it also contains unauthenticated SQL injection issues where you could just do SQL injection on it without having to even try to log in first before you're even allowed to do the SQL type stuff.
Shocker.
So you could also go in there and just delete the database or, add yourself a user so that you can do whatever you need to do.
Man, could you imagine being the person that discovers this and just being like, holy crap, what a mother load. What a mother load. Okay, now it's time to talk about cheap SSDs, the MX100 from Crucial, right?
Yes. So Crucial came out with a whole new series of different SSDs, and there's a couple of different interesting ones. They have a new data center class SSDs, which is gives you an alternative to some of the like the Intel ones. But they also have the new MX100, which is using the more affordable 16 nanometer flash, and they come out at about 43 cents per gigabyte. So you can you get 550 megabytes per second of read, and then depending on the size of the device, different write speeds because they, stripe the writes across the different the more cells you have. So the 128 gigabyte SSD can write at 150 megs per second. The 256 can do 330, and the half terabyte SSD can do 500 megabytes per second. And then depending on the size, it varies between 80 to 90 and 40 to 85 IOPS, or 1,000 IOPS per second. The drives carry a 3-year warranty and are rated for about 72 terabyte total writes, which equates to writing 40 gigabytes per day for the over the course of the 5 years. So basically that means you can get 128 gig SSD for $80, and it's not actually going to be a slow one.
Bring it.
But they also have their M500 data center class ones, which look very interesting as well.
That's exciting. Little price competition. I love the price. I love SSDs coming down in price.
Exactly.
Now if they just go up in storage, well, we're getting closer. 512 gigs would be just right.
Yeah. Well, they have that now, and
I could do that. I don't need a terabyte.
You're looking at like $225 for half a terabyte. That's not too bad.
No, not considering.
Considering that the list price a while ago, a couple of years ago, for a 240 gig SSD was like $600.
That's what I'm saying.
Although I paid $600 a piece for, maybe it wasn't quite that much, 200 gig enterprise data center class SSDs, but that's not really related.
Right. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this week's show, doesn't it, Alan?
It does.
Boom. All right. So just a couple of bits of business before we run. We'd love to have you watch live. Go over to jblive.tv at 1 p.m. Pacific on a Thursday, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC.
Boom. And, of course, we would also love to get your feedback. Just go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click the contact link, choose you could choose other shows if you want, but I would choose TechSNAP from the drop down personally. That would probably be your best bet. And then send us in your question, and we'd love to answer it on a future edition of TechSNAP. Don't forget, we also have the subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv where you can submit stories to the show. And last but not least, we also have a limited time Unfiltered t-shirt available. Go over to teespring.com/unfilter100, which just hit its 100th episode last night. We got long sleeve, short sleeve, and hoodies, and we got some great colors. And Angela worked on a really great design with the Unfilter camera and a special 100 edition logo. Over at teespring.com/unfilter100, there is 12 days, 10 hours left. We've got 19 so far of our goal of 133. So there you go. Another 100. Jeez, these shows, I keep hitting 100 out. And it's like I keep showing up and then they keep happening. I don't even understand how it works exactly. And now here we are at 165. It blows my mind.
Yeah, we've blown through all the numbers.
Yeah, all of the numbers.
And you can also remind people, the TechSNAP 100 shirts are up for resale on Teespring as well.
Yeah, is that just, would you remember the URL to it? Is it TechSNAP 100? I'll see if I can find it. TechSNAP. Yeah, they just started. Now, there has to be a certain enough amount of people that say they want them, and then they'll do another run.
Okay.
Right?
I wasn't sure how that worked because I noticed that people said they had ordered, but the number hadn't changed.
Yeah, yeah. So you say, I want this, and then I think what it does is, so you see they're in a queue, and if enough people say they want it, they'll print another run.
Yes. So if you missed out the first time on your TechSNAP 100 shirt, you might still be able to get one.
If enough people want one, and it looks like they need, if just 11 more items are reserved, they'll bring that design back. So you can go reserve yours right now. That'd be pretty cool, and they'll notify you. Or I think you can either be notified or they'll just they'll process the order when they reach that reserve. Yeah, that's teespring.com/TechSNAP100 or teespring.com/unfilter100. You see how we did that? Good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, Alan. All right. Well, that does bring us to the end of this week's episode of TechSNAP. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to go grab an RSS feed. We also have BitTorrent links if you'd like to help us defer the bandwidth costs. And last but not least, we'd love to have you join us live and participate in our chat room. That way you can help us name the show and chat with us in between segments. It's a whole lot more show. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.